ad maiorem Dei gloriam was this phrase coined by Ignatius, or is it attributed to him? Whatever it is, it means doing everything for the glory of God. Ignatius learned this through a very hard way. And today's readings we have heard are in a way connected to this theme. In today's first reading, we heard Prophet Jeremiah in a way grumbling. He has been given a task to speak to the Jews who are hard-hearted, who want to kill him. Jeremiah, in a way, wants to give up his mission. But we heard that God's love was burning within him, which prompted him to move ahead and go ahead in his mission. Something similar happened in the life of Ignatius, which you all know. He was a man full of dreams, full of ambitions, noble, who wanted to please himself and attain self-glory in his mission, fighting for the king, and thus win for himself the glory. But the cannonball shattered his dreams. And while he was recuperating, initially when the doctors operated on his knee, some part of the knee was jetting out, the bone was jetting out, and he didn't want that to happen to him because he still had his dreams. Then he had to undergo a second operation. Imagine in those days without anesthesia going to the operation, because that worldly dream was still there, to gain a name for himself. And still after second operation, he had a little limp still. But then came the time of recovery, when he read the books, the life of Christ, the life of saints. There are no other books at the castle. And he read these books, something was happening within himself. His heart began to burn to give his life for God alone. He felt these earthly dreams, ambitions are passing. But the dream to serve the eternal King is a permanent happiness. So he began to reflect over his life, the life of Christ. And they wrote the spiritual exercises. A very important document, the discernment of spirits. And so he said, I have to give up the world and walk the paths. He also learned through hard way what it means to follow Christ. What does it mean to follow Christ? We heard in the gospel passage. To be a disciple of Christ, it means hating one's own family members, one's own life, carrying the cross daily and counting the cost. This is what Jesus told the disciples. Ignatius felt that to follow Christ, he had to give up the family ties. And this is what he did. He began to walk the path that God showed him. Where was God leading him? No, he did not know himself. But he left himself in God's hands and said, let the Lord guides me, I will go. And as he moved on in life, he realized that to be able to preach, to share what was happening within himself, recovering, he needed to study. As he tried earlier to preach, and he was imprisoned twice for the church authorities, said, you have no theology, you are not a priest, how can you preach? And then he began to study at the age almost late 30s with the youngsters. Like St. Francis Xavier, who was his room companion, others. He began to share with them what he himself had experienced. And he was able to win youngsters like St. Francis Xavier. And then in the course of time, they went to form the Society of Jesus. And he realized that I can see God in everything. Let me then offer to this God my entire ambitions. He felt that to win man's glory is futile. Let me offer all that I have to God's glory. This is what we heard in St. Paul telling us in the second reading to the Corinthians. He says, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, he says, do everything for the glory of God. So whether we're eating or sleeping or studying or working or helping somebody else, don't do this to attain your own glory. Do it for the glory of God. And that's how Ignatius felt, that whatever he does, the society does, should be always for the greater glory of God. And mind you, this is not easy because we are human beings. We need, we look for appreciation. We look for someone to thank us for what we have done. That's because we're human beings. But when you have this inside the Spirit of God, when you see God in everyone, a small act of kindness, what we do in people who are suffering, who are happy, then we will be able to, in a way, do everything for the greater glory of God. As we move on in life, let's reflect on our own life. Can I see God in everything I do? Can I see God in people who are suffering, who are longing for love? Do I do things for my own glory, or do I do things for God's greater glory?